Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of REI E-Expo. We had some fantastic knowledge sessions yesterday and have a great lineup of knowledge sessions today. Our first session for the day is, can low carbon hydrogen power Indian business? Preliminary hurdles and way forward. Our session partner is WBCSD. I welcome all our panelists, which are Dr. G. Balachandran, Vice President, R&D, JSW Steel, Dr. Pradeep Pereira, Principal Energy Specialist and Head Energy, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Girish Sethi, Senior Director, Energy Program, TERI, Mr. Akshay Bhardwaj, General Manager and Lead Hydrogen and New Business, Acme Cleantech, Mr. David Hart, Partner, ERM and Director, E4Tech, and our moderator, Ms. Surbi Singhvi, along with Mr. Joe Phelan, Director, WBCSD India. May I welcome Mr. Joe Phelan for his opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Amit. And we're very pleased to be part of REI Expo once again. So we've organized this event for you today in partnership with ERM. And what we're going to do is explore the current state of play for low carbon hydrogen in India. Let me just tell you a little bit about the World Business Council. So we're a membership organization of more than 200 forward-thinking, forward-looking companies who work together to accelerate the transition to a world where the more sustainable companies will be more successful. We are CEO-led, we are market-based, market-driven, and we're a unique platform that focuses just on sustainable business. These 200 companies represent all geographies and all sectors, but they include our partners for this event today, ERM, who I mentioned, and also some of the major Indian corporate houses like Aditya Birla Group, Godrej, ITC, the Tatas, UPL, and so on. All of these companies are united around a single vision of making the world more sustainable for everyone by 2050. Together, these companies have committed to a set of criteria which we believe are the most ambitious for any membership sustainability business platform in the world. So they include net zero commitments by 2050 with a science-based roadmap of targets for 2030, protecting nature, promoting human rights and diversity, and transparency and business disclosures to markets. And together, businesses work on accelerating adoption of clean technologies that can change systems around food and nature, the built environment, mobility, and especially climate and energy. And these companies also have a shared vision for systems change, which our members are at the heart of. But focusing just on climate and energy, which is the theme of REI Expo, we have an important team member based with us in India, recognizing India's critical role in the energy transition and in tackling climate change. And that team member is my colleague Surbi, who's on the call today. And her job is engaging companies in action in India. And globally, we're working on low carbon hydrogen. And so what we wanted to do today was just explore a little bit about what's happening with low carbon hydrogen in India. So globally, these companies are working together to achieve three important steps in the advancement of low carbon hydrogen. The first is a set of definitions of what counts as low carbon hydrogen based on, and categorizations based on the carbon intensity. And that's really important to get a common understanding of what constitutes low carbon hydrogen. And from that, we're supporting companies in making pledges about procurement of low carbon hydrogen, so we can create some demand side signals. We're also using these definitions and pledges to engage with policymakers on the kind of environment that's needed to greatly accelerate the speed at which low carbon hydrogen gets deployed. And also we're examining where businesses have deployed low carbon hydrogen solutions to understand the technologies and the business applications and the business models with the goal of supporting much greater adoption. So this work is happening, led by WBCSD with our members. And if any business is interested in finding out more about this, please get in touch. You're welcome to participate in this work stream and share information and learn from it. We think it's very important. And part of this exercise that we're doing globally is to understand what's happening in India. There's been some coverage in the last 6 months, news coming out of the government. Terry have been leading an initiative with businesses in India. But we wanted to organize this event to surface what's happening and kind of bring businesses up to a common level of understanding about where activity is today in India. And so Sorby has convened a panel of people from business, from academia, from finance, to really understand what's happening. So with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Sorby, who will take us into the meat of this event.
Thanks a lot, Joe, for the opening, and good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you all with us for the discussion today on low carbon hydrogen. I think we all understand that the fuel low carbon hydrogen has a potential to bring in some of the hard to abate sectors at the forefront in our fight against climate change, and hence it is extremely critical in the decarbonization strategy that we have as a nation and as globally as well. While India has an advantage of having access to low-cost renewable energy generation sources that can support production of green hydrogen, the road ahead is fraught with a number of concerns as well, including mainly around the commercial viability aspects of using low-carbon hydrogen, given its high cost of production. So it's not only electricity, but it's also the need for electrolysis and hence electrolyzers that is needed for production of green hydrogen, and as well as the high costs attached with transportation and storage, plus a dedicated infrastructure that is needed for the entire ecosystem. So we are fortunate enough to have a panel of experts on low carbon hydrogen to throw light on the current state of market play, not only globally, but focusing on India and the way forward of this market as they see it. I think Amit in the beginning did a part of my job, which was to introduce the panelists. So I'll skip that, and I will say a couple of lines about the panelists as and when we have them for the discussion. I think one of the very important aspects of this market is having the right policy framework and really the national targets that some of the countries have set to spur growth in this market. A number of countries globally have been able to do this, including Canada, France, Australia, Japan, Norway, Germany, and the list goes on. In India, we have a national hydrogen energy mission that has been announced, the details of which are still awaiting. We have David Hart with us, who is a director at ERM, partner at ERM and director at E4Tech. He has had the privilege of working with a number of these governments and companies in these countries on the subject, and he's actively involved in discussions with leading Indian companies as well in this space. So David, you have 10 minutes. If you could just give us a glimpse of the global low carbon hydrogen market and set the context for India, it would be great. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Sorby. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, a real honour, and an honour also for ERM to be part of WVCSD and the fantastic work that you're doing. So thank you very much for your leadership on that. As Sorby says, I'm going to give you a little bit of a global overview in order to link into some of the Indian specifics, which the panelists are much, much better able to cover than I am. My background is in originally engineering. I ran a research group at Imperial College for a while, but I've been doing hydrogen for about 25 years. And this is an unprecedented time to be participating in this kind of event and to be discussing what the future of hydrogen looks like. Very, very exciting moment. I'm going to talk about a number of different areas, but all of which will have some relevance to the Indian context. I'll go straight into that now. Firstly, I just wanted to give you one slide on E4Tech because the complexity of what I'm a director of and what I'm a partner at may be confusing. E4Tech was, until about 3 months ago, a pure play sustainable energy transition company We worked on areas such as bioenergy and low carbon transport and energy storage, and definitely on hydrogen and fuel cells, which is my area. We were acquired by ERM in order to give additional strength to the work that they do in the energy transition and in the low carbon transition more generally. We've done a lot of work in fuel cells and in hydrogen historically. For anybody who's interested, there are links on this slide to some of the previous reports that we've made. But I don't want to dwell on that. What I wanted to do was give you this background and introduction to what's happening globally. And the change that has happened in the last really 2, possibly 3 years is extraordinary. So for a long time, hydrogen was seen as an academic answer to a complicated question, something that would always be far into the future, something that would be important at some point. But what we see now is that people realize that it is important now. It's important to really take action and to ramp up in order to meet the very significant challenge that we face with climate change, but also with other things. And that's manifested in organizations such as the Hydrogen Council, which is analogous perhaps to WBCSD, but is purely focused on hydrogen. But it is also CEO-led, it's member-driven, it has 123 members, including 1 or 2 Indian members. But it's driven by a whole different range of organizations, from finance to basic industry, to steel making, to automotive companies, hydrogen producers, all sorts of things, which gives you this initial important point, which is that hydrogen is a very broad church. It touches all parts of the energy system, and it can help us decarbonize a lot of different areas in the energy system. The other thing that's changed over the last couple of years is that there's been really strong policy starting to be put in place. So Japan and South Korea have had policies for a long time, but the EU is now targeting very significant rollout of electrolysis, renewable electrolysis, as Surabhi was mentioning. Germany in particular is looking to deploy very large amounts of electrolyzers, and we see other countries also represented. But of course, this is not just about Europe. We see the USA, we see North Africa, we see Chile and Australia getting very engaged. And of course, India, even an announcement this morning in the Times of India about the need for refineries and fertilizer manufacturers to start thinking about moving to renewable hydrogen. So this hydrogen mission is something that's clearly about to play out. This slide is about modeling. So the reason why hydrogen is important is because in order to decarbonize fully, in order to achieve net zero, it's very difficult to do that without including hydrogen. We can electrify a lot of different areas, but depending on how much renewables we want to use, whether nuclear power is part of the mix, what we believe about carbon capture, sequestration and use, hydrogen plays a greater or lesser role in almost all of the models going forward to 2050 and beyond. And some of them use very, very significant amounts of hydrogen. And that's the chart on the right. Multiple megatons of hydrogen per year. Now, I think we'll hear from Terry about the policy side from India in particular, but there are really 4 main drivers of this. And I've already mentioned net zero. So greenhouse gas reduction is one of the things that's really brought hydrogen to the forefront. But there are other underpinning factors. So in some countries, industrial policy is incredibly important. So Japan and Korea for a long time, but increasingly in places like South Africa, understanding how to profit from hydrogen technologies has been an underpinning for why the government is looking at supporting different uptake and different types of technology in different regions. We see air quality as a really big driver as well. It tends at times to be pushed aside when we're talking about climate change, but in fact, of course, it's responsible for multiple thousands of deaths worldwide. And in cities in particular, hydrogen can be used in transport, it can be used in heating, it can be used in other areas, which significantly reduce pollution and significantly improve air quality. And the last point is really about energy exports and about use of renewables. So we are building out renewables at unprecedented rates. Sometimes it's difficult to use those in the places where they are located. So hydrogen offers us an opportunity to be able to export those renewables from countries with excess to countries with less. So there are lots of things that sit behind the policy recommendations that I think we are pushing for in terms of supporting hydrogen. How does it help? Well, this will be something that is discussed in detail during the panel. So I'm only going to touch on one or two areas. But I mentioned that hydrogen is pervasive within the energy system. So we already use it in fertilizer manufacture, we already use it in refining, we already use it in many areas. That hydrogen is produced from typically natural gas, sometimes even from coal. So it has a high carbon footprint. But we can also use it to reduce the emissions from a number of other sectors. Steel making is one that will be discussed, but it's also, it feeds into natural gas mixes, home heating. It can be turned into transport fuel to decarbonize heavy duty vehicles, and it can be used in chemicals manufacturing. So there are many, many areas where low carbon hydrogen can help us decarbonize. This chart comes from a piece of work which was commissioned by the Hydrogen Council. We worked with McKinsey on the analysis behind this. And this shows areas which in the near term or the long term are more or less competitive for hydrogen. So the top left-hand corner, the light blue, shows areas which are already potentially ripe for hydrogen to start being introduced in order to aid decarbonisation. And that's because they are cost competitive against other low carbon options. So against electrification, against biomass, against other things. And there are many areas which are possibly competitive in the future, not competitive yet, but those include particularly a lot of the transport options. It should be said that this is a generic chart. So this looks at situations which are sort of melded across a global best case in some instances. So we're looking at costs of hydrogen production which are not regionally specific. They are looking at areas where we can get to maximize. And that's very interesting because it means that different countries, different regions will progress at different speeds. And that's something that I think is going to be important when we talk about the Indian opportunity. The reasoning behind that is possibly clear on this slide. So the storyline on this slide starts at the top left and moves across. And essentially what has happened in the last 10 years, and particularly is accelerating now, is that we've put in place an enormous amount of renewable electricity generation. So we're now capable of producing terawatts of renewable electricity, something which is way ahead of all of the projections that were made 5–10 years ago. Costs for wind and solar have dropped dramatically because of that. And we see strike prices that are down in the 2 or 3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a fantastic place to start if what you want to do is produce hydrogen. And of course, if you have renewable electricity and you can use it directly, that's a great thing to do. You shouldn't necessarily look at producing hydrogen if you can already decarbonize directly. But that electricity price will drive low cost of hydrogen. Not right now, because we still need to scale up electrolysis, we need to scale up the rollout, we need to optimize systems, we need to put them in the right places. But the opportunity for hydrogen, which is competitive and then even outcompetes that produced from natural gas, is very significant. And that should come in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on the location. The cost depends significantly on the price of electricity, and it depends on the region in which you're located, because you need to run the electrolyzer for a good period of time. So not just while the sun is shining, for example, or not just while the wind is blowing, but preferably while both of those things happen. And that bottom right chart of the globe shows areas of particularly advantaged renewable capability. And you can see that India is one of those. India has very good solar and wind capacity, and therefore it has the capability potentially to produce hydrogen at low cost and at large scale. And that's really interesting because that means that there are a lot of things that you can do locally without having to resort to imports, which is what is being discussed, for example, in Japan, in Korea, and to some extent even in Europe. I'm going to finish up just with a couple of points, maybe teaser points, which will be brought up in the panel discussion. So there's a very important regional element to this. There is also a geopolitical element. We shouldn't forget that. One of the things that will change as we move towards a greater proportion of hydrogen in the economy is that we will start to see displacement of traditional fossil fuel supply routes. We will start to see changes in the ownership structure, perhaps, of the different fossil supplies, the supply chains, the shipping organizations, and that will have many, many effects. And we see many oil and gas companies and other fossil fuel companies strongly on board as part of this transition. So companies such as Reliance, such as Aramco, such as Shell and BP. And we see others who are perhaps less committed and are waiting and watching to see what happens. But that's going to be a really important area in the future. So how I wanted to finish this up was to just give you those highlight points. India is in a really interesting position. I'm not an India expert. I've visited a number of times. I love the country. I love all of the resource that you have available, human resource and capacity and renewables and all of those things. And you have that capability, I think, to be able to move relatively rapidly into a low carbon hydrogen supply situation. There will be significant indigenous capability. There is always a complexity in scaling up. And I mentioned that, and I've not really touched on the electrolyzer industry as yet. But the electrolyzer industry is in transition. So until recently, the electrolyzer industry was project-based. It was very much about producing fertilizer, raw material. The feedstock fertilizer manufacturing was a significant area for electrolysis. It's now shifted to become an energy market area. And that means that it needs to scale 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times over a very short period. So there are supply chain questions, there are manufacturing cost questions, there are capability questions. And again, I think India, with its really strong manufacturing base and its capability of producing quality at low cost, has an interesting position to play also in the supply of electrolyzers and not only in the supply of electrolytic hydrogen. So Indian manufacturing can help support scale up. Even within India, there will be a lot of difference between the different regions. So clearly the renewable resource is different, the water resource is different, there will be different access to grids, there will be different industries which are located. And one of the things about hydrogen is it is most cost effective when it is not transported long distances. It can be transported long distances and it can be put into pipelines, but in order to start off, it's often best to co-locate. So there may be differences between Indian regions in terms of how that is best done. The last thing I want to say is, although other countries perhaps have already started with policy measures and started to deploy projects in the 20 or 50 or 100 megawatts, we're very, very early on in what I call the hydrogen marathon. We're still very much in the early stages of the race. And so India has a fantastic part to play as that marathon gets underway. So thank you for listening to me. I'm very much looking forward to the experts talking about this on the panel discussion. I'm available for questions later on if there are things which are broader. And thank you very much for having me participate in this very, very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David, for setting that context. I think it's clearly established that, and David also pointed at that India is at an advantageous position, be it for the fact that we have a lot of renewable energy sources, or the fact that we have the capability to have the right infrastructure in place to produce hydrogen. So I think I just want to say that while we are early on in the race, we are still caught in that chicken and egg situation where the supply side is waiting for the demand to pick up, and the demand side is waiting for the supply to scale up. So, of course, policy has to play an important role in this. But I'm just going to go to Dr. Balachandran first to talk about what JSW has some ambitious plans for using of low carbon hydrogen for steel making. I think green steel is a word that has become very known recently, which earlier probably we couldn't have imagined, and hydrogen has a great role to play in it. So Dr. Balachandran, if you can throw some light on what JSW has in plan for use of hydrogen, and what are the kind of support measures that you need from policy and market to ensure that you are able to implement on those plans. Over to you, Dr. Balachandran.
Yes. First of all, thank you. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development for giving me this opportunity to give some perspective from the steelmaking side where it is trying to decarbonize and go towards hydrogen-based steel making or green steel making. Basically, India is the second largest steel producer, and JSW Steel is one of the largest. It is the largest steel producer today in India with 21 million tons capacity. The management is very much committed to green steel, and towards that, JSW Steel also has a sister company called as the JSW Energy, and they have gone in with tie-up with Australia's Fortescue Future Industry. And in this JSW Energy, they have planned to get around 20 gigawatt power capacity, in which nearly 88% of the portfolio would consist of green and renewable energy. So I think there is a great opportunity for us to get into this green steel, because already the management has made a commitment. It will be adopting to innovative technologies like offshore wind, battery energy storage, and solar type of renewable power sources. The idea is to initially plan to produce around 15 million tons per annum of green hydrogen by 2030. So, today, the coking coal in India is around 88% of the coking coal for blast furnace is being imported, which is around 720 billion Indian national currency. So, trying to use hydrogen instead of coal is always an attractive option for India. And that is being very seriously explored with a lot of commitment from the management side. However, when we try to look at decarbonizing the steel sector, we also try to look at the competing technologies, because hydrogen may not be the most viable solution as of today. So on the blast furnace side, we try to look at the efficiency improvement, which people know how to do it, and several best available practices are there. Based on that, the people who practice the process, they tend to improve the process efficiency. And there are other alternatives which are emerging, which is the biomass that can be used instead of coking coal. And that is an intense research, and techno process is available, and several Brazilian studies are showing that that is a viable route for sustaining the business through blast furnace. Although hydrogen is the initiative what everyone wants, if we can make a carbon cycle which is sustainable, even then it is a more sustainable effort, so that the most efficient way of steel making is the blast furnace route, and that can be sustained. So basically using the biomass, it is possible to sustain the life of the blast furnace for 2050 and beyond, because it makes one of the most efficient way the iron can be made. So this is going to be a very competitive process to the hydrogen based route. Again, we have the carbon capture and utilization process which are coming up, and using the carbon capture, we may be able to produce bioethanol, as some people have demonstrated, and or we can use this for other applications, or at least store the carbon dioxide. And this is the most viable thing, as we feel that as of today, to decarbonize compared to all other things, including the hydrogen, which may become a little bit costly as of today. And the electric arc furnace route, yes, there are some improvement in electric arc furnace, because directly they are able to use the renewable energy source to melt the scrap. So that way we are able to decarbonize presently the grid-based power consumes power from thermal energy route, which is coal-based thermal energy, and that can be totally bypassed by directly feeding to electric arc furnace, the renewable power. And an example is there at two places, one at Nucor and one at the European steelmaker SSAB. So basically, all these are pointers to say that we have competitive technologies right now to the hydrogen, and steel mill is looks at various options available. So the EAF route also, we are looking at how to do with renewable energy as directly as well as through the hydrogen. So right now, whatever we do with green hydrogen is going to be only on the basis of pilot trials. And maybe by 2030, it is thought that the price of the electrolyzer, the hydrogen, may come down to $1.5 per kg or so, and then it becomes economic. However, we'll be in tune with the technology. If we start working with the green hydrogen based direct reduction ion, or injecting the hydrogen through the blast furnace route. So these are all some of the possibilities what we have. In JSW, we practice 2-3 different routes. Already we practice a gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen in JSW. We have the conventional blast furnace BOF route, where nearly 4 blast furnaces run in Vijayanagar unit with 7 BOF, and there we are able to make the conventional way the most efficient way of steel making. We are one of the lowest cost steel producers. And the other process what we have is sinter pellet going towards Corex process. The Corex process gives a top gas which is rich in hydrogen, and this hydrogen is used for our direct reduced iron. And the top gas from the Corex, what we get has around 20% of hydrogen in it. And we are able to use it for Midrex process for direct reduction of iron. And that is what is the current process what we have in Vijayanagar. At our Dolvi plant in near Bombay, we have the natural gas based process for DRI making. The DRI is used in the Konark process. It is an electric arc furnace, and there we are able to process this DRI made from the natural gas, and we are able to convert it into steel making. And we also have a plant which is at Salao near Goa, and this plant produces direct reduced iron by natural gas, and there is a small carbon dioxide capture facility, and hence we make the blue hydrogen as well in JSW. And the capacities wise, if you see DRI making facility at Vijayanagar is around 1.2 million tons per year, and at Dolvi we make 1.6 million tons per year using the natural gas. In Vijayanagar we make it by the Corex gas, and in Salao we have 0.9 million ton per year of capacity of using natural gas, and this entire thing goes to Dolvi for conversion to steel making. So cost difference wise, if we see the base blast furnace BOF route, if we take it as X, it is 14% more costly when we go towards the Corex based process, and gray hydrogen. And when we go towards natural gas based hydrogen, it is the cost increases by 19%. And for blue hydrogen, it is around 24% cost, more cost for the product. So basically, the roadmap wise, JSW Steel has conceived that 2022 to 2024, we'll be trying to look at injecting the Corex gas. How we can replace it with natural gas is one of the possibilities. And there are certain technological conversion that is needed, because when we try to introduce hydrogen for iron oxide reduction, it is basically an endothermic process, and because of that we need to make certain technological modification to the furnace. So some amount of capex has to be put into the process to modify to suit for the natural gas, large scale natural gas or pure hydrogen usage. So when we make the green hydrogen, we must be able to use it for the DRI facility at Vijayanagar. So we will be carrying out between the phase of 2022 to 2024 some preliminary trials of introducing natural gas for the DRI, and also we plan to use.
Sorry, Dr. Balachandran, if you can wind up in a minute, just to ensure that everyone else
natural gas. So we want to try it with clear additions. Around 2% of coal saving is possible with 7 to 10 kg of. If I can introduce 2% of natural gas into the blast furnace, I will be able to get around 7 to 10 kg of coal reduction, coking coal reduction. So we are planning to do this, and 2024 to 2030 we will be trying to do with the natural gas additions to the DRI facility at Vijayanagar. and then it will be taken up in the other plants. So the other possibilities what we are looking at is also trying to look at the carbon capture technology. Already we have one plant where we are doing the carbon capture and recycle the entire fuel back in the process. And we wanted to look at the green hydrogen possibility. Only one problem what we face with the green hydrogen is the capacity wise, it requires for conversion of 1 million ton plant, we require gigawatt size of power input for the process, and that is going to be very formidable. As of now, for every 1 million ton of steel produced, 2.75 terawatt of energy is required per annum. And that sort of a capacity we don't have. India's total renewable energy capacity is 0.094 terawatt hour as of now. And to meet that sort of a substitution of completely green hydrogen is not likely to take place. So one of the possibilities is to go for syngas, which is a coal-based hydrogen generation. That is viable because India has a large amount of coal reserves. Low quality coal also is available, which can be used for conversion of the coal to syngas. And this syngas rich in hydrogen can be used, and it will be most economic in the interim period. So JSW is looking at all these options, and our trials will be starting with initially gray or brown hydrogen, and then it is followed by green hydrogen. We will be only doing the pilot study to understand the process and the difficulties and the infrastructure that may be required to with the emerging technology. And then we will be going with the other possibilities, whatever I have listed. Yes, madam. I would like to wind up with this. There are
Great. Thank you.
Answer. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balachandran. You did answer. I think what you indicated at is that while you are using gray hydrogen right now, you have a few plants for blue hydrogen, and then you'll move towards green hydrogen, mainly because of the concern of the commercial viability. I think you are looking at a time scale of 2030 is when it will become commercially viable. I think I want to move to Mr. Girish Sethi, who's been actively involved with various stakeholders as well as the government in giving policy suggestions. Mr. Girish Sethi, Dr. Balachandran said that the main hurdle is that one, we need a lot of renewable energy capacity to ensure that we are able to produce adequate green hydrogen that can then be used for steel making. The other is that commercial viability of green hydrogen itself looks a little far away in the future. Do you think there are any policy, and I know that you've given policy suggestions to the government as well, but if you can highlight those policy recommendations that can speed up this process and ensure that the viability is not that far in the future? Over to you, Mr. Girish Sethi. You have around 5 minutes to cover the policy suggestions.
Yeah, thanks, Surbhi, for having me in this panel. I think the point which Dr. Balachandran mentioned about the commercial viability, whether it is the steel sector or whether it is the fertilizer industry or refineries which are presently using hydrogen in large quantities. In fact, today, if you look at the total demand in the country, it's around 6 million ton or so. And almost the entire hydrogen demand today is actually in the fertilizer and the refinery sector. And our estimates say that by 2050, if we really want to move towards this low carbon pathways, it would be somewhere around 28 to 30 million tons. And almost 75 to 80% of that would actually be coming from the industry sector. And apart from these two sectors, which are already using hydrogen from the steam methane reforming route, the steel sector is going to be the big user, I think. And of course, what Dr. Balachandran mentioned about the commercial viability, that is going to be the key thing in all these sectors. So what is important, I think, when you ask this question about the policy perspective, I think we all know, and I think David also mentioned in his opening presentation about the hydrogen mission, which the government of India announced. The finance minister of India in the budget speech talked about the hydrogen mission in India. This mission is, we hope that it will get launched during this year itself in 2021 or so. I understand MNRE has prepared the first cut draft, and it is under some kind of a interministerial consultation. So we do hope to see some good pointers which will really help both the demand of hydrogen as well as on the supply side, some inputs on that. We did provide some inputs to the ministry on that in the early stages. But I think the mission definitely has to cover the aspects related to the pilot projects, to the storage aspects, to the R&D side of it. And I think we believe that the most important aspect in this, as I think you mentioned in your opening remarks about the chicken and egg kind of a situation, I think would be to really have a situation where you are able to show to the supply industry that yes, there is a demand, if not today, maybe in a couple of years, in a couple of 4 or 5 years in that period. And then only I think the whole process would start. So on that count, I think the most important point should be some kind of a support for demonstration projects or pilots in the use industries for the use of hydrogen from variable renewable energy sources. And also, I think something around the storage aspects as well, because I think that's a point which has not been touched upon much. So whether we are, I think internationally, people have been talking about underground storage, but in India, not much has happened on that. No research on that. So we are talking about tank storages could be the one option, but that could be slightly costlier as compared to the underground. So one is the demonstration projects in the use industries, whether it is the steel industry. Second is around storage. And then I think most important in India moving forward would be, I think, things like clustering of the demand. So geographical clusters, whether it is we did a study in last year and we came out with a report which is available on our website on the possibility of geographical clusters, maybe in the western part of India where you have chemical industries, or in the eastern part of the country where you have large steel making units. And having these geographical clusters which can use hydrogen would actually help in kind of distributing the cost of the infrastructure and making it more viable. So Mr. Balachandran mentioned about $1.5. We in our study actually said that it would become probably viable somewhere around $2 per kg by 2030. But I think we have also heard in many forums, many of the optimistic players talking about even $1.5 well before 2030. So I think it all really depends upon where we really land up in terms of the cost of hydrogen, and that would really spur the demand in the industry. I would just like to also mention one more point, if there are 1 or 2 minutes left, is I think the need for some kind of international consortiums, international funding. Dr. Balachandran mentioned about the SSAB project. I think that's something which everybody has been talking about in the steel sector, the hybrid project. So bilateral support or multilateral support from World Bank, and I think from the climate front like GCF, I think we have ADB representative on the panel. I think I would like to just mention here that it was at one point of time when we were early on in the RE race, we were talking about support for RE, wind and solar. But I think now when we're talking about harder to abate sectors, I think it's here that probably larger funding from multilateral bodies and even GCF and all that should be coming in such kind of areas where you really need some demo projects in developing countries, probably not in the developed ones, because this here where the demand is going to grow up. The national steel policy in India talked about almost 2.5 times the capacity. We are 100 million tons today in steel, and it talked about around 300 million tons or 250 million tons by 2030. Our estimates say that we will be around 4 to 5 times the steel demand by 2050. So if we are going to get new steel plants on the old technology or any new expansions in the fertilizer again on natural gas, I mean, these plants have a huge, huge life, not just 20, 30 years. I remember, I think one of the oldest blast furnaces in India probably lasted 80 years or something like that after all modifications. So it's important to have these demonstration and pilots operating. Hydrogen is not something which is new. I would say that probably, I think I remember the place I was born many years, 64 I was born, that had a fertilizer plant was actually based on electrolysis of water. It is in Nangal in Punjab. But those were the days when electricity was in surplus quantities. But then they moved on to natural gas and naphtha and things like that. But I think we as an industry are used to using hydrogen. Chlor-alkali industry has been using hydrogen. So I think there's a possibility, if all the policy support is coming in, not just from the government of India, but I think larger international funds coming together to support such activities, that would be extremely useful. And just last point, I think echoing what David mentioned about the electrolyzer manufacturing, I think that will be the key to India. India has been focusing quite a lot on Make in India. So some kind of a PLI, which we have seen for specialty steels and for battery and others, I think that would also be a key in trying to push electrolyzer manufacturing capacity in the country. I think these are my initial remarks, and I'll be happy to come back again if there's time. Thanks.
Great, thanks a lot, Mr. Sethi. I will just touch upon one of the suggestions that you made on having the demand clusters. So that we can easily ensure that hydrogen is the transportation, we spend less on transportation and storage. So with this, I'll go to Akshay Bharadwaj, who is leading the hydrogen work at ACME. And ACME has recently commissioned a $3.3 billion plant in Oman of green ammonia. So, and you also have a pilot, ACME also has a pilot which is running in Rajasthan. With that experience, Akshay, if you could just tell us what is the kind of infrastructure that is needed to ensure that wherever your renewable energy is produced and hence hydrogen is produced, to take that hydrogen to the demand centers, and whether one, we have this cluster approach already or plan for it, whether the RE that we have is in line with the demand clusters where hydrogen would be needed by industries. And two, if not, then what is the kind of infrastructure that is needed and what needs to be done on that front? Over to you, Akshay. You have 5 minutes. If you could just quickly wrap up in 5 minutes, it will be great.
Sure. Thanks, Surbi, and thanks everyone for inviting me to the panel. It's really a privilege, and also all the panelists. It's been very insightful to hear everyone's views. Let me begin by saying that as ACME, we are probably we have just commissioned probably the world's first integrated facility of green hydrogen, green ammonia in Bikaner, Rajasthan. Currently, we are producing around 1 ton of green hydrogen, and along with we are going to produce 5 ton of green ammonia from our Bikaner project. And that has really given us a lot of knowledge and learnings in terms of actually putting together some projects. When everyone else is talking about demonstration projects and pilot projects, we have actually commissioned one. A lot of knowledge and a lot of learnings has come out of that. And with that, also, as you mentioned, we have also announced a $3.3 billion project in Oman, essentially, which would be probably the world's first large-scale industrial scale project. The current capacity over there would be 2,400 tons per day of green ammonia production. And, with that, we are also producing around 400 tons per day of green hydrogen. So, and as I mentioned, in terms of timelines, we are looking to commission that project by end of 2024, the entire capacity. And so that will make us, most likely the world's first large-scale project to come online. Now, before I answer your questions around, specifically on the infrastructure side, I do want to mention that, a lot of discussion has happened around, the pricing of green hydrogen, whether the market is currently sustainable in that aspect, and what kind of policy aspects do we need to make it more robust. I just want to make a quick comment around that, since we already are producing green hydrogen, green ammonia, so we are very well versed with the pricing aspects. And also we have commercialized those projects. So we have existing buyers currently as we speak in the market in India, and also almost our entire capacity of the Oman project is also been we have secured the off-takers, and that too for long-term duration contracts and at a bit fixed pricing mechanism. So a lot of discussion around whether this whole ecosystem around green hydrogen is sustainable in India and in globally. So all I can say is that it is definitely sustainable at current rates. The kind of pricing that we are looking at is not really as high as generally that is being spoken around. We are fairly competitive currently also, with the conventional ammonia markets and the green hydrogen. Obviously, the gray hydrogen, green ammonia, gray hydrogen and green hydrogen aspects do have some kind of a price disparity at the moment. but we are reaching those parity points, pretty much in the next 2 years time frame. And that is something that gives us comfort, and that's why, I mean, it makes very it's a huge commercial sense for us to also develop these projects at such good price points, which makes it attractive for various off-takers. And again, as you mentioned, we are talking to steel companies. We are in our potential customers include fertilizer companies, steel companies, as well as gas companies, oil and gas companies. And also a lot of offtake has been secured by maritime industry, because that is something which is a real immediate demand which has come up because of the IMO regulations that make it imperative for them to transition to decarbonized fuels as early as 2025 and then 2030 in a linear fashion. So all in all I can say is that there is a lot of activity happening globally, and the reason why there is a lot of positivity around green hydrogen and green ammonia, it's because the price points are drastically reducing. We are going to reach price parity with the conventional ammonia and conventional hydrogen in the next 2 to 3 years time frame, and also still currently also we are quite competitive. So that's really, I just wanted to bring this up. And to your point on the infrastructure side, yes, there are challenges in terms of transporting green hydrogen, but then the solution currently, as we speak, is to not transport green hydrogen directly, but to use it as a derivative, and that's wherein green ammonia comes a big play. It's because the technology and the infrastructure and also the supply chains are already in place, for many years, for decades now, and relatively it's quite competitive pricing which gets offered on the transportation side for green hydrogen currently. So that is one aspect. Then there are other derivatives also on the methanol side, and you can further crack green methanol and green ammonia to get green hydrogen at the base point to use it across end use segments. What kind of infrastructure currently do we have? I'll break this up into 2 points. One is there are still policy aspects that need to come in that will support the development of the supply chain and the infrastructure industry to transport green hydrogen. Currently, we are only dealing with the SMPP rules, which define the transportation and storage and handling of the green hydrogen in India, which if you want to because those are sort of mentioned long time back, so they need some revision onto those aspects to make it more holistic at the moment, because a lot of development has happened on the transportation side as well. Currently, we are using manifolds, truck-mounted manifolds to transport green hydrogen, but those are quite expensive in nature, and also a lot of compression needs to be done, so that will add extra cost on the transportation side. So as you mentioned, the Make in India opportunity is quite great, even on the supply side and the infrastructure side. So if the government does put together some policy, so it shall include some aspects around the policy on the transportation infrastructure side as well, on how to sort of imbibe those policy aspects. So that is something that we are currently doing. But as of now, the industry is pretty much confident that if you produce a derivative of green hydrogen like green ammonia, it can be transported across continents and across longer distances. So I'll just pause here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Akshay, and thanks for giving that more positive outlook to the sector. With that, I think it's a perfect time to go to finance, because now we know what we've heard from the supply side, that it's going to be commercially viable in a couple of years, and green ammonia is already competitive with other sources, conventional sources. So, Dr. Pereira, if you can touch upon the parameters that you consider while financing a project in a technology like in a nascent technology like green hydrogen, and what you would require, the support that you require from the market to ensure that you can go ahead with the financing.
Okay, thank you very much, and I would like to thank the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for inviting me for this panel. I have also learned quite a lot, I think, listening to the other panelists, and I was pleased to hear from the previous speaker that the green ammonia and green hydrogen has become commercially competitive under the current market conditions. I think Asian Development Bank is not if I'm to talk on behalf of ADB, I think we are not a commercial financier, we are more of a development financial institution. So I think my feeling is that in spite of what we heard from the previous speaker, the hydrogen, I think, hasn't become a bankable sort of investment at this moment. Hopefully, it will be so, I think, in the near future. But at this moment, the parity price, I think several people mentioned $2 per kilogram, $1.5 per kilogram as the kind of price that that would make sense, I think, for somebody to purchase hydrogen and use it for some industrial application. On the other hand, cost of production is a bit higher than that, maybe around $5 per kilogram. So I think, given that fact, I think there's a need for demonstrating the technology first. I mean, we heard quite a few examples of how hydrogen can be used in the steel industry, how it can be used in the fertilizer industry, how it can be used as a transportation fuel. I think these kind of applications need to be demonstrated at scale. And there, I think there's a role for, I think, development financial institutions like ADB and as well as international community to come up with, including the government of India, to come up with this so-called viability gap financing. That was the approach that was taken at the nascent stages of the renewable energy with the feed-in tariff kind of mechanisms. I think we'll have to sort of structure that kind of funding mechanism between now and let's say 2028 or 2030, until we bring down the cost of hydrogen production to a comparative and the parity rates. I think, as you mentioned, it's a chicken and egg situation. I think at the same time, there has to be certain policy-driven incentives to create the demand for hydrogen. I think there can be certain mandates, I think, given to certain industrial groups, I think, certain industrial sectors to use a certain amount of hydrogen, somewhat similar to the renewable purchase obligations that was introduced in the renewable sector. So there can be certain sort of mandated requirement to have a certain amount of hydrogen usage, and then there can be a market for hydrogen usage certificate, something similar to RECs. Those are the kind of market-based instruments that can be created. Another kind of policy directive that I would think can be considered is a emission trading market. I think there hasn't been much progress at the global stage of emission trading market, but if a price can be set on carbon emissions, that would create a big incentive for demand for hydrogen, especially in industries like steel and fertilizer, which are difficult to abate industries. And if there is a price on carbon, and that could also act as an incentive. So these are various policy options that can be considered. I think from a financing point of view, there's a lot of there was a lot of interest on scaling up renewable energy. I think that is no longer.
I'm just conscious of time, Dr. Prera. We have a couple of minutes left. If you can just wind up in a minute. Yeah,
that's no longer an issue. I think going forward, I think at the moment there's a lot of interest on coal phase out. As you would have heard, I think in the recent G7 meeting, they have committed $2 billion for coal phase out. But I think a similar kind of a funding mechanism need to be set up under the UNFCCC or the COP framework to scale up hydrogen. Hopefully, if something like that can maybe happen, I think institutions like ADB can act as a conduit to bring those kind of funding to the Indian market. So I'll stop with that.
Okay, thanks a lot for giving that perspective. And I think it closes a circuit of discussion that we had with the finance view. We have a couple of questions, but I think one of the questions which if I could just go to the panel on with a yes or no, and we can probably have detailed replies in an email format to them. One of the questions is, can we bypass the blue hydrogen bit and go to green directly in India? So whoever would like to just give a quick remark to that, please raise your hand and go ahead.
I think I'll take the lead on this since again we have on-ground experience of delivering projects and not only in India but globally also in Oman, and we are in talks with the government of Chile and also government of Australia. So we are looking at a very large-scale portfolio of green hydrogen projects at ACME. And the reason why we are so bullish about this industry is because we believe that green hydrogen is the way forward, and it is here to stay, even as we speak currently. On the question around whether blue hydrogen should be bypassed, I think for India it does make sense. Definitely that even if we are looking at blue hydrogen, as I think previously mentioned, that a lot of issues around storage and carbon capture and the cost involved with that. already will be dependent. If we are looking at natural gas, there is an import price which is quite volatile, and then India is heavily dependent on that. And over and above, you add a lot of storage and carbon capture sequestration costs. So the viability will completely go off the hook. And on the other hand, you have already large renewable energy potential in various parts of the country, which will eventually sort of make sure that you use those avenues to produce green hydrogen, and with scale, those price points will even further decrease. So most definitely, I would recommend that green hydrogen is the way forward for us.
Great. So there is a yes there that we heard. Okay, I think I'll just end here. And thanks a lot for the constructive discussion that we had. Over to you, Joe, to quickly close.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Surbi, and a really big thanks to all of the panelists and speakers. Really informative, and it's great to have all the different pieces of the puzzle, sharing perspectives and views. So thank you all for that. We were very happy to work with ERM on this event, as well as REI Expo. There are contacts here if you want to get in touch with us or with ERM to find out more. So do get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you. And thanks all for a very informative event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe, for all the support, and thank you, WBCSD, Surbi, and thank you to all our panelists for their time today and for the knowledge share. We're always in paucity of time. This is such a niche topic. We should have marathon sessions about it. In fact, probably we can look forward for at REI, which is happening from 15th to 17th of September. Probably we can come up with a couple of sessions over there. So thank you so much for your time once again. I look forward to seeing you at REI. And to all our audience who have joined us to this portal, I would like to say that we also have a training zone in the lobby, which starts at 2 o'clock and ends at 6 in the evening. So if you want to be part of the training, you can avail the facility over there. Please also feel free to visit the expo booths, which are at the platform. Thank you so much, WBCSD. Pleasure having you here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.